Okay, so welcome to today's social system mapping on-ramp session for August 8th, 2022. Today we're gonna, Ben Roberts is gonna share his map with the R3.0 network blueprint map. So that's as much intro as I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hand it over to Ben, and Ben, you can take it away.
Thanks, Christine. Great to be here and to see all of you. Yeah, so this was a project that I was asked to co-lead in October of 2021. There's an annual cycle that the organization R3.0 goes through to produce these blueprint documents, and this is the 9th one that they've done, although it's number 8. Don't ask. So I came into the process being asked to be a co-lead author. But part of the reason they asked me is that they wanted me to organize things in some of the more collaborative ways that I'm known for doing. And so what wound up happening is that we assembled a group of about 30 people to produce this document in a highly collaborative way. And the map was an essential tool in both getting visibility into that group and onboarding new people into that group, because the group was fluid and it changed over time. And then in our self-organizing around different elements. So there were, the way the blueprint was structured, it just was published on September 6th, I think, 5th or 6th, forget, Monday, last week. It's 170 pages long. And then in the middle of it, there are 12 separate reports written by different groups that were either reporting on case studies, things that had already happened in the past, or action learning around our theme, which was funding governance for systemic transformation. How do we make decisions around allocating money in all kinds of different contexts, investment, grant making, internally within teams, in alignment with the principles of regeneration in order to create systemic transformation in a positive way. So that was our task, was to write about that, and the map, and was sort of an essential tool. So I think I'll go ahead and dive into that unless anyone has a question about this.
Yeah, what's the was that the overarching purpose of our, I'm not sure what the group is, and I'm not sure what their overarching mission is.
So R3.0 is a nonprofit with a global network of people involved in systems change. It stands, the 3 R's are redesign for resilience and regeneration. Here, I'll share the cover of the blueprint. Maybe that's a good way to step into this. It's led by Ralph Thurm and Bill Bowie. And
is the funding from that nonprofit?
So it is a nonprofit, yes.
Yeah.
And part of what we did actually was to walk our talk with this document in terms of how we allocated the money that we received for the blueprint. So here's the blueprint, which can be downloaded at the link that I stuck into the chat. As I said, it's 170 pages long. You can see the index here. So there's an introduction, there's a critique section, and then here are all the case studies. There's 6 of those, and all these action learning reports. And you'll see in the map how all that got self-organized, as well as a set of sort of general activities for putting all this together.
Ben, can I follow questions here? So are the blueprints on different topics? Is the general R3.0, is it
right
cover? Yeah.
There are different.
Me.
This is the 9th in the series, and it completes a 9 report cycle. So each of the 9 has a different topic, and you can go to the R3.0 website and see that. So again, I was the lead author and came up with the title of Project Steward for myself, and I had support co-stewarding it from Lisbeth Williamson, who's part of the R3.0 team. We had a couple people who were very active in some of the other writing, and then each of these different elements here would have a different set of authors on the different topics, for example. And there's actually one part of our action learning was mapping. And so you might want to take a look at chapter 5.4, where we explore the idea of doing some social system mapping around the field of innovation in funding governance, or what we were calling regenerative funding governance. And there's a little bit of a map from that, not the one I'm presenting here, but here's the one I'm presenting. We started just by having everybody that was was interested in contributing to this. Some of them were part of a core team, some of them were part of what we call the working group, some of them were just kind of ad hoc members of this. We put them into a map and had a little bit of data about how people knew each other going into it. And then we created a set of other views, how the blueprint's connecting us, which we'll look at in a second. We asked people, how do you want to participate in this process through a survey? We'll look at that next. Then we started self-organizing around some of that data. So that's the activities view. And then finally, as we were in the middle of this process, and this team really assembled in February of 2022 and worked steadily in different configurations through mid-August. So somewhere in the middle of that, I don't know, around June maybe, we said, maybe different groups need some support, and we started using the map for that as well. So here's a view that shows how the blueprint work actually started creating connections. So the blue lines are people who met as a result of the blueprint, and the brown are people who knew each other, but for whom working together resulted in a deepening relationship. And I think in some cases, we can see some data about this. So for example, here's the executive director of R3.0, Ralph Thurm, saying that he got to know Tom previously, but deepened his relationship there. And sometimes they're more significant comments, and you can go, I don't know if there's more to say about that particularly.
May I ask a question about that view?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe this is what you were referring to, but I'm also seeing some very thin gray connection lines. Are those ones that aren't commenting on the current quality, or what or is that?
Right, those would be ones where the blueprint there was no data about how the blueprint developed the relationship, right? That's what we're looking at here, is how the blueprint is connecting us. And this data actually didn't get updated after we completed the project. It was a huge push to get this done. And I was really contemplating, do I go back out to people and say, go back to the survey and provide more information at the end? And I really wanted to do it, but it was a combination of my not having the bandwidth and my choosing not to impose on these folks at that time. But it still gives you a sense of both, how a project like this creates connections, and also how social system mapping can show developing relationship data, right? So this is the blueprint activity survey. I moved it down on the menu here because it was not something we used. It was something we used initially more than we used later on. But so this was a survey. When you created your profile for the map, you were asked, which of these things are of interest to you. So for example, we can look at someone here and where's this? Blueprint activities I'm interested in. So we're looking at a visualization of this data, and there was a checklist with however many things you're seeing here. And that allowed us to see, we knew going in that, for example, we wanted to have a case for regenerative funding governance. We wanted to have a critique. We wanted help with the production and organizing of the whole thing. And then we wanted people to offer these different case studies and action learning events. So we got, through this, through the map, we were able to see who's interested in these various things, and then target our conversations and our communications to them. Oops. And then that led to this view. So this is when we then started using the map for actual self-organizing. So instead of just saying, I'm interested in a case study in general, people could now propose a case study on a particular activity and put that onto the map. And here it was tagged as with a purple outline. It's that this is an exploratory conversation. Maybe we want to do this case study, maybe we don't. And anyone who's participating in the blueprint could then come in and look at these things, see who's involved, get a little bit of information and something about the status. then the green ones are when these actually got activated, commitments were made. And again, you can see also expressions of interest in this. People could say how enthusiastic they were about it, if they were considering participating, etc. So it was through this that those not only those 12 chapters on the case studies and the action learning activities got organized, but also some of the core activities like the production and editing. We had people indicate their interest more tangibly here, and we tag it by whether they were in a lead role or part of the team or just considering participating. So that was easy to see.
Right.
Ben, were those interest answers checklists, or were they open fields
On
the connection type?
Just like here.
Yeah, my interest in this, is that that's a checklist?
Some of this is a checklist, and then there'd be an open field as well.
Okay.
So for example, resources and connections I can offer, that would be an open field, but my interest in the activity, was either, was a checklist. So it was, you could say, you propose it, you're in a lead role,
Okay.
you're considering participating, and then that thumbs up thing, that was coded as width. So the thicker the arrow, the more enthusiastic somebody was about something.
Nice.
A big thumbs up. So Francesca didn't say she wanted to participate, but she just said, yeah, this stuff on DAOs, case studies and action learning, I think that's really good. Any more questions about this view?
It's great.
We created some little filters, so you could just say, show me the action learning, for example. Here's the one on mapping that I mentioned before. Or just show me the case studies. Some of these were in multiple categories. Theme explorations were more like conversations we wanted to have that could inform the blueprint, but weren't necessarily things that would generate a report in the blueprint itself. And then here's that support view, the activity support view. So at a certain point in time, we knew some of the groups needed some help. And we created a way that added to the profile for a given activity, right? So here's the Chorus Foundation, and down here they made some requests, and they put a little more information about that. And because there's data in here about making requests, in this view, it shows up with the red highlight as requests made. And then for people, they could show up and just say, I'm interested in offering support. So that was down here. Do you have availability? How much time do you have? More about the support. These were different options. And then some of this matching then showed up. Where people could point. That's the other thing you could do, is you could see, okay, these folks are asking for support, and you could go into the SumApp interface and say, here's the kind of support I can offer. So here's me saying, well, I actually proposed the case study circle, and I'm willing to offer input on the work of that circle. So I wasn't a part of the circle, but at a certain point, I'm like, maybe they need some help, and I flagged that. So this view got a little bit of use. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of data that's there, but it was helpful in some particular cases. And I think in general, it just kind of models how, in a more of an ongoing process of self-organizing around teams, where the different teams might need support, you can use social system mapping as a way to just hone in on that element. So the only connections we're seeing are where there's offers of support being made, and the highlighting, the only elements that are visible are the ones that are asking for support in the case of the activities, or in the case of people, we just made them bigger and put a little orange circle around them. Any questions there?
This would have been a great one for people who are new to social system mapping, because and I think that they would have they'd have a ton of questions. And this crew is just kind of like going, huh, that like, that's really interesting. And what could I do with that? But then anyway. Sorry,
Well,
go ahead, Jim.
So Ben, you start out with a view of connections, then you go to a view of connections about activity interest, and then you move to a view of proposing actual case studies. And then now you're in the piece of people actually pulling together for collaboration. I have these resources to offer and so forth. So you're tracking through the generation from self-organization to actual implementation of one of these activities.
Yeah, I mean that last part, right? Once the teams formed around the different activities, they weren't so much using the map anymore at that point, right? They were having calls and meetings, and in the map there would be links to where that activity was happening, or at least who was heading it up, so you could plug in. There was so in the middle of all that, we then created that support view to say some of these teams need help from outside their teams, right? And we used the map to get a little bit of visibility on who else might be available to do different things and who needs help. And there definitely was some of that matching and organizing that happened. I can't say how much of it happened because of the map versus just that we were putting the invitation out in general.
Cool.
And all along, I think there was a combination of the map both being a tool that was facilitating the process of the self-organizing, but also as much creating value just by helping people to see what was going on, right? It was a combination of both. And if it wasn't clear, right, anybody who was participating and collaborating in the process could put those case study proposals up there, right, and fill out the survey for each of them. And we mostly used Google surveys to get it initially on the map, and then we would send people a link into some app to complete it, to add more information from there.
How often did you, I mean, were there set periods when you asked people to go into the map, or like how many times did the people on the map, aside from you, go in there and add to their data?
Right. So when people would first join the team, we would add them to the map and send them in there. And that was kind of a rolling process where people came in at various times. So everyone had that initial invitation. And then when we moved from, when we created the activity view, right, there was a whole flurry then of people coming in to do that. And then as new activities got added, there was a weekly email that went out. And so we were constantly updating people on new activities, and we would give them a link to the map as well, to have them go in and flag things. So there was a fair amount of that. A lot of that self-organizing happened in February, March, and April. And then there was kind of a pause until we went into the support requests view. And then we got another round of explicit invitation to engage. And then, as I mentioned, I was thinking we would do one more at the end of a kind of of what was the value you got out of this, and showing more connections and things like that. And I didn't put that invitation out. And this map may have an ongoing purpose as well, because we don't want this document to just sit there online or get printed out and used as a doorstop, which is large enough to do. We want to work on this, all those different action learning activities. Many of them are ongoing, including the mapping the field one that got energized there, and others. And so we want to have dialogue based on the case studies and other things, and bring in more case studies. So the map is a tool that we can potentially use for all this post blueprint activation work too.
Have you thought about, understanding that when you're publishing the report wasn't a good time to get people to reflect back, but have you thought about maybe a week from now, or, like after the dust is settled, going and doing that last step that reflection step for what's happened so far? Do you think you might do that? Or and how much of this project was you looking at the map and you sense making with the map as the mastermind, and the overall group or the various teams looking at it and seeing something useful for them. I mean, sometimes in my experience, that's a ratio of, like 99 to 1, or, like mostly it's the mastermind is looking at it and gleaning information, but in different contexts, there's more the members are actually digging in. I'm wondering if you have a sense of that.
Yeah. I mean, this view was generated through a collective effort, right? Pretty much all these lines were added by the people that they're coming from, all the connections. So here's Dita coming in and saying, here are the things I'm involved with, here's something I'm interested in, this is just something I like, and I want to acknowledge that. So that she was adding this data and ditto for the individual, for all these individual case studies and action learning activities. I put the core activities in because I was sort of organizing the whole thing. So I knew that we wanted this set, but all of these were added by different individuals. Did they did it through a Google form? Did they come to the map? Well, then they would go into some app and fill out more information about it. So there was quite a bit of engagement in the period where this view was.
Cool.
Ben, could you just piggyback on that? I'm unclear about the use of the Google form and then sending people the map. What did that look like?
I have to go back and look at the form to remind myself. I mean, I think part of it is just, getting the title of the activity in and the short description. We may have collected all this other data in the Google form and uploaded it or just copied it into some app. I can't remember.
So you were using the Google form to get the information so that you could manually get those on the map, seed it, and then allow people to come in and react to those.
What, Jim,
No?
Jim, how I think what he's doing, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's using the dual elements function, except that the dual elements is not really designed to enable map participants to generate group elements. And so he's generating the group elements and then loading them as a data set and then getting further information and connection information in some app. But that generating of the node we're working on it, but the generating of the node is a challenge. If you've got more than one node per person, especially. So that's what he's doing a workaround for.
And when you generated those nodes, did you just drop the spreadsheet from the Google form into the organizational level, the higher level entity map, or did you do it manually, pull it from the form?
He's putting them into some app, he's not putting them directly into Kumu.
No, I know.
Okay.
But
are you asking, did we do a bulk upload of a CSV file to
from
update
from the Google form? Yeah.
Because that was that's the dual element. You're exactly right. And those are the case studies, action learning, etc., are what in some app is labeled organization. And I can't, I think some of those we entered manually. I mean, in other cases, I have used CSV files to upload.
CSV file from the Google form.
Yeah, from the Google form. The thing is, you can't put the description in, right? The 140 character description that shows up in the tiles. So there's always at least a little bit of manual entry, and there weren't that many that it was a big deal to.
Right. Right.
So what did you learn, or, you've been doing similar things, like with 6 conversations and other things. I was just wondering about the evolution of, what you're doing and what you're learning.
I think this map was the first time I did a couple of different things, right? I mean, using using social system mapping as a way for a group to self-organize around activities.
Mhm.
First time I'd done that.
Yeah.
And I thought it worked really well in that regard. You know,
Mhm.
I could go into the map and see people adding data and like, you know, who was engaged and what they were interested in, and then have conversations with them about that. And then the support thing was also a new one, right?
Mhm.
Who needs help and who can offer help, and doing that in a very targeted way, not just kind of a, you know, checking off, I know how to do coding if anybody needs that, right?
Mhm.
But much more specific. And so both of those were new, and I think were things that I would definitely, you know, continue using the mapping tools for.
That's great.
I have another question. Did any of what you'd like, from when you started the map until the map was done, because it seems like you kind of added something, like you started in one place and then you added some new components or new questions or new views or ways of looking at it. And I'm wondering if how much, if any of that came from people in the network saying, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? Or if most of it came from you as the map maker sort of sensing their needs and just making the changes.
The support view came from people saying they needed help. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Cool.
yeah, we can use the map for that. They didn't say, can we use the map for it? But they said we need help them and use that. You know, yeah, let's use the map.
Yeah, I think that what you just said seems like a really, like, I think often there's needs. People say we need this, and you go to, oh, another point to solve that need, rather than saying, how can we build that need into this tool we've got going? So making that connection is like a mental habit that we're still developing.
And I agree that asking people specifically, what would you like to see this map do, is a great thing. And we're going to be doing that in the mapping project that's spinning off from this one around mapping the field of funding, governance, innovation. We're planning to sort of develop that iteratively, just starting with a simple map, and then asking the people who put data on the map, what else do you want to know?
Ben, was this the second time that people have been introduced to mapping this way? Seems like you started out with a more of an introductory map, you said, of just getting people connected with each other, and then you built this purpose-built.
With all this map, we just
okay.
brought them into it in stages, right? So first, in the first view, they had, you know, who's showing up, how they are already connected, and what their activity interests were, right? The one with the blue rectangles that was just off of a checklist. Are you interested in offering case studies? Are you interested in, you know, helping to create the list of patterns of regenerative funding governance? Are you interested in production of the blueprint? And so people would check off which things they were interested in. We had that initial data. Then later we invited them back in to add specific activities they wanted to propose or indicate their interest in the ones others were.
Did you have any sense of how and if they use that visual directory in any way?
Well, the fact that they added a lot of data meant that they were at least going into some app. Were they looking at it in Kumu and analyzing it? I guess I don't know for sure.
I don't even mean analyzing, just like, you know, whether they were using it as a visual directory. My guess is that if people are energized to put information in, it's they're looking at other people's information and
Yep.
you know, modifying their own based on, ooh, somebody said that. I forgot I should. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, was there anything explicit about any activity of using it together? Or?
You know, we had regular calls twice a week over the period from February through August. And I'm sure on some of them we spent some time looking at the map together. You know, I would often use that to just help kind of onboard people or talk about what's going on and things like that. So I know we used it there at least. The other thing that happened is that R 3.0 has its own very large, network and community and a particularly a set of what they call application partners. And they were excited enough by seeing what we were doing with the mapping for the Blueprint project to say, oh, we want to map for our overall network too. I think I'm presenting that in November.
Nice. And will that be essentially a visual directory, you think, to start? Or is there a purpose fit for that?
I think that this idea of self-organizing around different kinds of activities is something that they got excited by, and that as we're starting to talk to the application partners, they're really interested in how to use the map as a tool for horizontal connecting and self-organizing.
Nice.
I don't know if we'll have that ready by November. It's going to start out more as a directory for sure.
This gives me that picture of the directory as an on-ramp, and then and then moving to the and that next project would be sort of building the periphery, the density of the periphery, connecting people to people, or is it really then focused on activities that are in the core?
I'm not sure, this is just like 400 some odd people and organizations in that network, and I'm still getting to know it. My guess is there is a pretty dense core already, and the map will visualize that, and it'll enable a sense of who's on the periphery as well, and some connecting could happen. It may be more about the self-organizing, that may be the greater value. I'm not sure.
Cool.
Sorry.
I keep saying it's cool, but this is this is this is just a really good implementation of a set of ideas that I think are really useful and valuable, and so I'm happy to see them being played with, even to the degree, I mean, clearly there's more potential there, but just the degree that it is there is a really good start. And I appreciate it.
Maybe one of the things that's a little different about this map is that it was designed for a project that was, only going to last a certain amount of time. As I said, I think we will continue using it, but that wasn't the assumption when we created it. And I think sometimes there is this notion that you only create maps if they're going to be something that goes on forever. And to me, that it's quite clear that there's lots and lots of use cases where it's a shorter term thing and well worth the effort involved.
Yeah, and I think that just to build on what you're just saying, I think that for the shorter term, there really needs to be some kind of cohering factor that it's cohering around. So like if it's a short-term map and you're just sort of maybe thinking about a network, and you don't have a really clear, either it's a significant event that you want to visualize, like Jim's 50th anniversary, or how Bush Foundation used to do their big things every year. We would do a map for that, or something like a clear purpose with clear outcomes, that it's easy to define what do we need to see about each other, and what, it's just like a more constrained. I think that's a great starting point. And I think that if you're not in the sort of long-term, we're going to iterate this forever camp, then you need that cohering beginning point that you had with this and leveraged, and then it can go where it goes.
We had a very clear task.
Yeah.
Or at least, the idea we were going to create a document was clear. How we were going to do it was not clear. And that's something where the map was quite useful, because as I mentioned in the past, the process R 3.0 used was entirely different and much less collaborative. They would have a couple, one or maybe two lead authors who would work with the two lead members of R3.0 and do 90, maybe all the writing, just those folks. This other set of people were just kind of advisory. They would offer, do a literature search and say, check this stuff out. They would review drafts and offer comments. But this whole idea that much larger group was actually going to take shared ownership of the document and help to define its content and write whole sections of it was not how they did it before.
That's cool. They should, I know this is probably not a realistic thing, but somebody should evaluate the difference, like just to the participants in the project, how generative did you feel like this approach was compared to the old approach? Get some documentation to support.
If you read the preface of the blueprint,
Do they talk about that?
a little in the blueprint itself, the preface talks a bit about the contrast. It's not sort of a full-on evaluation, but it does name that and sort of say why they're excited. And they are talking about essentially having this be, if not an actual model for how, because they're going to repeat the cycle. They've done 9 of them, and now their plan is to do another 9 as a new iteration, and to at least take inspiration from this collaborative approach, if not replicate it to some degree or iterate on it. So they're quite clear that this was a sea change in terms of the amount of collaboration that went into it, and therefore the degree to which new relationships were forged or relationships were deepened and ongoing work got seeded. It just was kind of night and day.
That's cool. Good job.
Hey, Ben, I'm sorry, Mary, you're trying to say something on mute.
I was wondering, it seems like with this group or ecology of people, there was more potential maybe because in terms of mindset, they were more going in that direction. You didn't especially experience less barriers than other people do in terms of mapping and seeing the use of it.
Yeah. I mean, people cared about the project, but there was, as you might expect, when you approach 30, 40, 50 people about something, there were all kinds of different levels of how much people were interested or not, and different ways they wanted to engage. And there's a lot of strong egos and personalities in there. So it wasn't the easiest group to work with.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought leaders, though, in there around collaboration and working together. So you'd think that there would be a deeper level of insight about just that. And
I don't know about you, but I find that there's a world of difference between being a thought leader on how to do something and actually being the person that does that all the time.
Well, you're singing my song in a way, but okay. So you busted my bubble.
It's like, some of my favorite people who are thought leaders on how to have dialogue. Do you want to be in a small group with them? You're actually going to sit and listen to them talk most of the time.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
Hey, Ben.
That was another nice thing about the approach, is that we really did grant, we were trying to grant authority to people whenever they wanted it as much as possible. So if you had a strong passion for, this particular thing, the odds were you could do it, and you didn't have to follow a bunch of rules and restrictions that somebody else set or coordinate in all kinds of complicated ways. We tried to simplify that.
Well, to that end, then, did you have any norms or guidelines or constraints? I mean, like, let's say somebody came in and they wanted to say, I think that, funding governance should be, kings should do it and they should control everything. Let's just say they did something totally out of, the vision. How was that Was that managed, or how was that managed? Or was it just like perfectly serendipitous that everybody was already perfectly in alignment just because of the history of the organization?
Yeah, we had to decide, did we want to curate this or just sort of, invite what comes, and we basically went with the latter and trusted that the group of people we were engaging with, or that would get connected to us, were going to have, be aligned enough that what they wanted to say would fit. But we did reserve the right as a core team to say, this doesn't belong here. And in one case that did happen. And the person who wrote that piece, they started out saying they wanted to write a certain case study, and we're like, great, that case study looks perfect, but then instead of writing the case study, they wrote something else. And they said, I know this isn't what you were expecting. Maybe it doesn't fit with the blueprint. And we looked at it and we said, yeah, it doesn't actually. If you wanted to change it in this, and this way, it could fit. And in the end, they didn't do that until we didn't include it. But it was still valuable that they showed up actually and challenged us in the ways that they did. But there was not that much of that, basically.
So from the core team, there was a very clear cultural change that you were shooting for greater collaboration and input, or not? Or did it just happen serendipitously?
I dragged everyone along on that,
Well, and I was wondering to what extent you personally were modeling a different way of being, and that you had facilitation, authority, power, opportunity within to model that. Was there a lot of that?
Yeah. I just kind of claimed it. I mean, when they asked me to do this, that was part of their thinking. They knew that that's how I worked and had some experience of that in other contexts.
And were there a whole lot of new people that came in this round? So they were being introduced to this slightly different culture from the get-go, or were you having to shift the whole?
The group that assembled came from a lot of different directions. So there was one whole chunk that was part of our 3.0's, network. And for them, it was like, oh, wow, this is really different from being asked to participate in these things before. And for the most part, everybody was really happy to have, to be able to kind of run with what they were inspired by, which was basically the invitation. And then there were people that came in through other directions, so I brought some people in that I've worked with before, that were interested in the topic, I thought, and then other people that were involved would invite folks to come in. So we had people joining the group over that collaborative period through different directions. So it was not a group that was as that group had ever worked together before, or probably ever will again. Right.
Can I go, this is just from the map, you've got a question, annual amounts of funding requested. What does that mean? And what is it serve? What purpose is it serving for the map?
Use that data, in the beginning, I had the thought, look, you can create a survey, right? Somebody's going to add a profile. It's pretty easy to put any questions you want in there, if you've got a group that's willing to spend 10 minutes completing something, right? So because we were working with funding governance, how you allocate money, I thought, well, let's get some data on how much the people that are showing up are actually involved in requesting or deciding where money goes in different contexts. So we collected that data with the thought that it might be something we would use with the group, and never used it. It's there to see. There's a lot of things, that we could have done, in retrospect, to work with data like that, or to have the group interacting as a group more than it did, right? Our process was basically show up, say you're interested, identify what you want to do, let others know, and self-organize around that. And as there wasn't a lot of sort of collective thinking before people sort of went off into their different activities. And that's maybe where data like that might have been helpful, and some other processes we might have used. But as it was, people put a lot into this, and that was also part of the dance. How much do you want to ask of anybody? It's not there remotely close to their full-time job. We did have some funding available, though. We had a pool of 30,000 euro that we collaboratively distributed in 4 different rounds or 5 different rounds of funding allocation. So anybody who wanted some money could get some.
How many do you think of the outcome, how much of the outcome was generated by one person who wanted to go off and do this and they went off and did this versus 3 people who wanted to go off and do that and they went, like, how much of the actual product is collectively generated on the whole, as opposed to individually generated with a little bit of input here and there from somebody maybe? Because those are 2 different.
The action learning activities were teams, collective processes, and 6 case studies. I think maybe 3 were written by individuals and 3 were teams, something like that. Sometimes the writing of the report was different from what the activity was too. So there might be multiple people involved in what led to the report. But the report itself might have been written by one person. And then all the different coordinating and production related activities were shared, collaborative.
Ben, just so I'm clear on the dual entity piece of it, you've got work streams and you've got case studies, you got activities, you got themes. Those are all different organizational types that you're using at the higher entity level. They're all on equal footing in terms of structurally how you.
Yeah, I think there were four categories. Should we look at that again? Hold on. So the action learning, case studies, core activities, and theme explorations. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I didn't even see those up there. I was just clicking through.
And they're over here too. So these, as I said before, the theme explorations were sort of general conversations people might want to have about, should we do this or not? This one actually then wound up becoming an action learning activity. Here's one that we just talked about, or we said we might talk about and never even did. So the action learning and the case studies, these generated actual sections in the report, and the core activities. These were things that were needed in order to produce the report in some cases, or they were elements that we knew were sort of the main elements that would bracket the case study and action learning reports, like making the case for generative funding governance or a critique of the current paradigm. Those kinds of things were the patterns, sort of identified ahead of time. We know we want this stuff. And then we also know we've got this pool of money and we want to allocate that with people, and we have all these production tasks. So these were all those 4 things were the dual element things that could be added. Yeah.
And did people have so that people do have relationships to the core activities? Because they're almost, it's almost as if the case studies, the action learning, and the themes are related to the core activities. But
wait, are you asking, was there connection?
Yeah, I mean, like, what is that connection for Lenka to mapping the blueprint?
Yep, she was part of our team that met to do that, right?
Okay.
There's a little bit of information there. There's not that much.
And from a SumApp perspective, all of these element types are, I mean, they're all organizations, but they're all similar level element types. They're just elements that you have a relationship to.
People to org connections.
Yeah.
Correct.
But it's the same question, same set of org questions, same set of people to org questions used for all of the element types.
Yes.
Because you couldn't have it any other way with SumApp.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at the survey if you want for those connections. There might have been, I don't think there were different ones, like if you're connecting to a core activity, answer these questions. If you're connecting to a case study, answer these. I think it was all just, what's your connection here? Are you a lead? Are you interested in participating? Those kinds of things. Say a little bit more about it, and the enthusiasm, the thumbs up rating. Those were your options. And we didn't use org to org connections. So we could have had something where, you could say, wow, this one's kind of similar to that one, or, this is a spin-off from that. I don't know. It just seemed like a level of complication that this group probably would have been overwhelmed by. But I could see in general, if you're conducting a self-organizing process and you're using mapping like this to support it, that as lots of these different activities get proposed, having some data about the interplay between them could be valuable. Things might merge or stuff like
Well,
that.
you could also, just sharing a thought that I've had is, let's say there's this group that's did X and Y in 2020, and then it split to do two different things. If you've got time tagging and you say, and you ask the question of, an org to org question, you could say, this group was the seed of this group, or, this group is a spinoff of that group. Then you could actually time tag through and see, oh, there was this, and then that turned into that, and then that turned into that, and then these new creations. So you could actually start to see that as well. If you you need to plan, or, just have a little bit of being prepared for that to happen, but, or for, so you're collecting the data at the right time. But that would be another possible.
I think,
You could do that in this one because, going forward, if certain things spin off of other activities, as the new elements get added, then you can see the time difference, and you could just add the connection questions.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the primary purpose of this map was not to visualize the whole and see patterns of how it evolved over time, right? It was to enable people at any given point in time to see what was going on and find their place in it, or signal how they wanted to
Yeah.
be in new ways, right? And so it is, the value was primarily getting down into the details of the data,
Mhm.
as opposed to looking at overall patterns.
Mhm.
To say that the latter isn't valuable and useful, but it is a very, they're two very different mindsets, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
increasingly, I'm thinking that so much of the value in these maps is it the getting down into the data and level. People put so much effort into their profiles, for example. There's just so much richness there. And how much of it is actually being read by how many people, right? What
Yeah.
can we support people engaging at that level to really tap into all the hours of care that went into collecting that data?
Yeah, depends on the value that I was referring to, not saying it should be here or is here, but when people there comes a point when when they start thinking about the ripple effects, like we started this thing here, and then this is the ripple effect, and that's a ripple effect. So that's one way I've thought of getting at, if you really want to, prove that convening, or that, having some conversations turns into cool things, this would be one way of, if you had already started the data at the, gathering it in the beginning, that'd be one way of doing that.
Yeah. And showing that the mapping's valuable too. I think those kind of, here's how this grew, to the extent the mapping was integral to that growth, then you're demonstrating the value of the whole thing. I'll just go back to this view too. I think not that one, this one, just to get a sense of how engaging is building relationships. To me, this is just a really simple thing. I started doing a bunch of maps we've seen before. They're all how did the blueprint connect, create connections, and that to me is just a very powerful kind of a picture.